Ceann Comhairle, I want to join with the Taoiseach and the leader of Fine Gael in expressing the hope that the talks which are taking place in Belfast will reach a successful conclusion. And I want to say on behalf of the Labour Party that we support the efforts of the Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister in trying to bring about a resolution to matters there, and in particular to bring about the long-awaited devolution of policing and justice powers to the local assembly and executive in Northern Ireland. I want to ask the Taoiseach about pay. By the end of this week, every employee of the state will have had his or her pay cut for the second time in less than a year. The pay of low-paid workers in the public sector earning €25,000 a year will have their pay cut by €160 a month. The pay of a guard or a teacher in the middle of their scale will have had their pay cut by €400 a month. The pay of a staff nurse with 10 years' experience will have his or her pay cut by €560 a month. I wonder, does the Taoiseach appreciate the level of anger that there is among these employees, which anger has been compounded by the sweetheart arrangement which the government made with senior civil servants to limit the impact of the pay cuts on those senior officers. And now we're beginning to see the pay cuts in the public sector being used to drive down levels of pay in the voluntary and private sectors. I have here a circular which was issued by the HSE to agencies and charities which are funded by the HSE, directing them to cut the pay of their staffs by the same amount as the cuts in pay in the public sector, even though there is no legislative basis for that, and even though those staffs are not public servants and were not included in the legislation that was passed by the Oireachtas before the Christmas. Over the weekend, we saw reports of plans by the government to provide for an inability to pay provision in respect of some categories of workers who are covered by legally enforceable minimum rates of pay, and there have been repeated reports that it is intended to cut the national minimum wage. So I have three questions for the Taoiseach arising from that, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, Taoiseach, what assurance, if any, can you give to workers who have had their pay cut not once but twice over the last year that they will not have their pay cut again? Secondly, can you tell us on what legal basis the HSE, or indeed any other public authority for that matter, is issuing directives to the agencies which are funded by it that they have to cut the pay by the same as the pay that has been cut for public servants? And thirdly, can I ask you, Taoiseach, will you rule out cutting the national minimum wage?
Final supplementary from Deputy Gilmore.
First of all, can I welcome the statement by the Taoiseach referring to the letter that's on its way to me from the Taoiseach, that the HSE letter was issued in error. Do I take it from that agencies who do not comply with the stated wishes of the HSE to cut the pay of their staff will not, as a result, have their allocations cut correspondingly by the HSE? Secondly, I note that the Taoiseach has hedged her bets on the national minimum wage. As I understand it, that issue has been with the Labour Court now for, I think, since November of 2008, and we don't seem to be any further advanced on it. We hear every day that the government wants to restore confidence and purchasing power and so on, and get retail activity moving again. It's very difficult for people, particularly people on low pay, to make commitments in respect of purchasing if they don't know what their wages are going to be next year. And I think it is time that the government came off the fence in relation to the national minimum wage and gave a categorical and fair assurance that the national minimum wage will not be cut. Thirdly, I don't want to anticipate, as you would say yourself, Ceann Comhairle, the debate on the bill and on the government amendment with regard to the inability to pay clause for EROs. But I interpret what the Taoiseach is saying is that that will only apply on a voluntary basis. If that's the case, that's the case. But let's see what is actually proposed by government. The one question that the Taoiseach didn't give me a reply to is when I asked her for an assurance that workers who have taken a pay cut and of the order that I have described, and particularly those who have taken a pay cut now twice in the last year, is she going to give an assurance to those workers that their pay is not going to be cut again? Again, I come back to this issue of, we heard the Taoiseach at the weekend in his radio interview talking about the necessity for confidence and restoring confidence to the economy, all of which we would agree with. But if people are to have confidence in the economy and consumer confidence is to be restored, people need to have some certainty about where they're going in terms of their earnings. And again, I invite the Taoiseach to say, if she will give an assurance that the government will not be going back again, a third time, to cut the pay of employees whose pay has already been cut.